and
670 AM.
Radio Iran.
Radio Iran.
همبستگی با ادیان
با دکتر صادق نمازی‌خواه.
We are back, and we're going to start with Father Alexei. And I already posed a question, if you remember, regarding the economy and the religion and the distance the economy is causing between the people and their beliefs.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to build on what Salam said a moment ago. You know, Pope Francis has made some rather challenging statements about economies and about distribution of wealth. And that's not sitting well with some of our very affluent Catholic people. If you look at the early Christians, if you look at the Acts of the Apostles contained in the Christian Bible, they were actually more socialist ways of living where people pooled their resources and shared according to each one's needs. I don't think that Pope Francis is actually advocating total socialism, but he's certainly advocating a look at that whole idea of redistribution of wealth. And then how you use wealth. And I think that's another turnoff that we talked about earlier about the younger people today, when they see people starving in the streets and stuff and people not doing anything to help them when money is there in certain situations, it's automatically a turnoff. So I would support Salam's suggestion that perhaps we could go and meet with the mayor's office or someone there and say, you know, the city of Los Angeles raises beaucoup bucks now with its tax to aid the homeless. Where is that money going? And religious, perhaps even would do this. Our Buddhist Catholic dialogue was challenged by the Vatican to take on some social justice issue. One of the things we've taken on is looking at the homeless situation here and what we can do together. And so we've partnered our St. Vincent de Paul Society, a Catholic charitable organization, and the Buddhist equivalent, the Tzu Chi Foundation, and they're working hand in hand together down on Skid Row and other places. Maybe other such faith traditions that have such organizations or even individuals of those faiths could come together and work together. Think of the visibility of people of different faiths and the different ethnic or religious attire helping people together. We even have a plan, Salam, to build 60 units of affordable green housing. We've worked with a Catholic agency called Mercy Housing. They have the plans, everything ready to go. It's the funding. How do we get the funding to do this? And it would be not just housing and green affordable housing, but there would also be a room in there, because this is a Buddhist Catholic endeavor, for where we could have joint meditation type sessions led by Catholics, led by Buddhists.
Rabbi Bilyak.
Well, I'm going to say things that, of course, will upset people, but the truth is that we now have a situation that many, many people now will never have to work. They have funds that they will inherit, and they will live very well, never having had to do anything in the way of productive work. One of the responsibilities that is very frightening is that at this time we need to be looking at things like the redistribution of wealth. There's no political support for the redistribution of wealth. There is a religious mandate for it, but nobody that wants to have a political career, including people who want to be in congregations as leaders, could lead for this important idea. Our society is simply now set up so that for the foreseeable future, there is no economic possibility for a very large percentage of the people. And we just need to begin to tell the truth about how lopsided the wealth issues have become. Yes, let's make sure that Mercy House has the funds for 60 units, but we probably need, if I understand the statistics, we need 3 million units tomorrow, what the politicians are talking about when they try to estimate what we need. So yes, 60 is a start, but this demands a complete reordering of the priorities of our society. And income redistribution would be a part of that now. How it's done and how it's administered and all those things, of course, create great conflict. But I don't think we have a choice if we really want to address these issues.
One of the things that I see that the big billionaires in the United States right now, they contributed large sum of the money to the Africa and the foreign countries and those things. Why they don't trust to do it in their own country?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a very good question. And I think that they don't want to look and see that it's actually, they don't want to acknowledge that it's existing here. They have this distorted view of the United States as being the land of milk and honey for everyone, you know, and they have it. So why doesn't everybody else get it? Why don't they go out and get a job, all that type of thing? Whereas people in Africa or Central America or in parts of Asia don't have the same structures and things that we have here.
Yeah, and I think another point about Africa is that maybe it's more romantic, if you will.
Yes.
You know, to go do something in Africa and act like you're changing the world and things like that. If they really want to create a change in Africa, it goes to what you were saying before, Dr. Namazagha, that let us liberate African countries from the shackles of economic slavery that the West has imposed on them for centuries, and remove them from debt. That will do a lot for the people of that continent. But going there and doing this and that around, I mean, whatever little can be done, I don't want to belittle it. I'm sure there is a lot of good work done in Africa, but it has to be done on a macro level. And if you have billionaires, they have the influence with countries to really create that change for the African continent.
But those billionaires don't listen to our radio show.
No.
Rabbi Beliak.
I do think that sometimes the impact comes the other way. In the field of healthcare, affordable medicines, especially for the care of people who have AIDS, came from the fact that this was an issue that was pressed for the more local production of less expensive medicines, and for the medicines to be broadly available. And that was really as a result of the efforts of people in Africa. And I think that the thing that we might pay attention to is that if we think about areas where people are unable to participate in our society, clearly the cost of medicines, the cost of medical care is one of those examples where the profit motive, again, is not the correct thing, but the care motive. And again, the African system has responded better to that than we have.
I would just like to say one other thing.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at the Greek word economia, that means the greater good. The financial situation should be for the greater good of everyone. Mm-hmm. And that means some drastic reordering.
Okay, we touched on the issue of the religion for the violence and all of the division and all of those fights. And how about the role of the warmongers and the economy of these Western countries relying on the arm manufacturers and all of those? Which comes first, the religious people causing this, or these countries are using that division between the religious people?
The military-industrial complex is the fuel, and the religious extremists is the match that lights up the gas and creates the firestorm. So they actually work hand in hand. And when you look at the Middle East and Africa in particular, those are the areas where the arms suppliers make the most money. In those regions alone, they're armed to the teeth. Yet those arms are used to kill their own people. And create the worst man-made disasters in the Middle East and in many parts of Africa. So you add to that then religious fervor in Nigeria and in eastern the Horn of Africa and throughout the Middle East, then they actually go hand in hand.
Yes, the former patriarch of the Antiochian Orthodox Church based in Syria once told me that if our people, our arms manufacturers, wouldn't sell armaments there because there are no arms manufacturers there would be far less hostilities there. It's our people making money on all this.
So, Rabbi?
I would, of course, second everything that my colleagues have said. I would also argue that one of the difficulties that we have with social media is that it helps in the process of producing fanatics. And a key part of this sense that sometimes you don't even need an organized military. You look at what happened in Rwanda. This was not a massacre that took place with sophisticated instruments. It took place with machetes.
Yep.
So the question of religion's responsibility to diffuse fanaticism is a part of that. And it's right. People who are looking to gain control of oil or natural resources will mobilize religious groups to say, you go and fight for this, and their goal is not anything but. I look at the specious withdrawal of American forces in Syria to guard the oil, and then the Kurds are left exposed to the will of the Turks who are coming in to destroy the people. I mean, these things are going on very close to home, and it's clear that we're driven more by our economic interest than by our beliefs.
I would just like to add that Rabbi Rwanda is a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier, where religious leaders don't call their people to task. Rwanda was primarily a Christian country, either Anglican or Catholic. And sadly, I mean, we have to admit as Catholics that some nuns and some priests were charged with fostering these type of hacking members of the other tribe to death. Mm-hmm. And they were brought to justice at the World Court in The Hague. Well, where are these bishops in those countries? Why weren't they saying this is absolutely wrong and put a stop to this?
Yeah. Actually, that's in the Quran. God says that, where are your religious leaders to say it's wrong? And God keeps extinguishing the flames of war that you keep creating. So that's something that we have to reflect on more.
Okay, now another question that I have, that all of these, I think, are related. I don't have anything against their religious organization to have income and support themselves, or religious leaders to have sufficient amount for the comfortable living. But what about those religious people that they really make a fortune out of the religion? So where that
they make what?
Fortune.
Oh, a fortune.
Based on their so-called profession as a leader of the religion, as a clergy, as mullahs, as a priests, as a rabbis. There are some people that in some religion that there's no individual income for the people except what they get salary or those things. But there are some people that they really make good money. And look at this, evangelists in the United States right now, they are building fortunes based on their religion. So where's the teaching of the religions on this thing?
Well, again, I'm going to speak as a Christian here. certainly that's wrong. Again, there are certain segments of Christianity that believe in what is termed the prosperity gospel, that if you pray and you have favor with God, then God's going to favor you, reward you with great incomes and donations and all this other thing. We don't ascribe to that. And I think that here in Los Angeles, for example, we try to set the example. Our bishops don't live in palaces. They live in the houses, maybe houses nicer than some other people's houses, but not as nice as Buckingham Palace or someplace like this, you know? So I think religious leaders have to set the example rather than being the exception when it comes to this type of living.
So I refer you to an old website of mine, Jews on First, where we for 10, 15 years tracked the role of a special evangelical Christian, but certainly there were Jewish groups and so forth that were raising money it was quite obvious were going to pastors having private planes and things that are really just symbols of wealth and power, and that religious people are as corruptible as anyone else is already something that does not need to be proven anymore, and that modesty in the private conduct as well as the public conduct of religious leaders is important. I also think that the fact that the IRS refuses to address these abuses. Senator Grassley was one of the people that for many years was trying to address this issue, but people hid behind the IRS lack of enforcement.
Or exemption.
Yeah. I do think that we need to begin with cleaning our own house. And that means that what's called the prosperity gospel is not just the venue of evangelical Christians, but there are profoundly disturbing examples in other faiths as well, including Judaism.
You mentioned something. Is it a relationship between the evangelical and some Jewish organization?
There's absolutely a relationship between the support by what are called Christian Zionists, and I would venture to say, as somebody who's researched this, that they are neither Christian nor are they Zionist. But clearly the connection between the vast sums of money that are raised by evangelical Christians who are seeking to bring about the end of time and the Battle of Armageddon by fostering overreach and unjust actions by the part of the Jewish people that are involved in the settler movement. That's a very clear connection. Today in the Jewish world, the central motivator behind what used to be the charitable activities that people did on behalf of the state of Israel are not coming from Jewish people. The vast majority of people who contribute the most money are evangelical Christians. In a sense, the Sochnut, or the Jewish Agency, has lost complete control of this, and it's a travesty.
Yeah, I think I want to balance that, though, with the other side of the equation, and that is those people who are working in religious organizations that are working at pennies to the dollar. You do find good religious workers, good people in the Catholic Church, in the Jewish community, in the mosques. They are not begging. They're not asking for money. But when I see someone who's working like at $12 an hour, and that person is a college graduate, that's also unacceptable for us. We go in extremes. Either we have these celebrities that are making money out of religion and it's a business, or we have people who are basically very poor, not complaining about it, but we don't do anything about that. And I think the theme from today's conversation is we are mandated by God to be the people of the middle way. Find that middle ground where we oppose the economic exploitation of religion, but we serve the needs of these religious workers. That if they didn't do the work, then who will do the work? Either we do the work ourselves, or we put a budget and we raise the funds to get the work done. So it's about what the goals are, what the work is, and who the people are, and to support them, and elevate their profile. So it's not just about the people who are making money off of religion.
Father Alexei, 30-minute closing. 30 seconds.
30 minutes. My goodness.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, this is not a sermon.
Yeah.
I don't preach for 30 minutes.
Yeah, we got the call. It's 2 minutes.
I would just like to hope and pray that for Christians, as we are about to celebrate the birth of Christ, whom we regard as the Prince of Peace, we might actually live his teachings and be an example to the world, be lights in our world today.
Thank you. Rabbi?
I think it's incumbent upon us to, of course, embody the teachings of the moment we're in religiously. For Jews, we're about to celebrate the holiday of Hanukkah, and it is the holiday that has taught us about religious freedom, but it's also the holiday that has hidden underneath it a history of religious fanaticism that needs to be addressed, has both things going on.
Salam.
Well, first of all,
you
this
can have 35 seconds.
35 seconds. This is my favorite part of the year. I love this part of the year. People tend to be more happy, and communities and families get together more. So I really enjoy, and we commemorate the Word of God, Jesus, in our faith, and so share that celebration with our Christian community, and in terms of Hanukkah and all the Jewish holy days, we're always one with the Jewish community. So I enjoy it. I just hope that we reflect on the Word of God, since we're celebrating the Word of God in Jesus, and actually start practicing the Word of God.
Amen.
Thank you. دوستان عزیز، ممنون از توجهتون به برنامه ما. تا برنامه آینده، خدا نگهدار.